This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on state of economy and customer-centric initiatives of RBI. The participants are Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, economic analyst, and Sonu Sood, AIR correspondent.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched today virtually two innovative customer-centric initiatives of RBI, Retail Direct Scheme and the Reserve Bank Integrated Ombudsman Scheme. He said these schemes will expand the scope for investment in the country. To begin the discussion, Shubhamoy, can you tell us something about the Retail Direct Scheme launched today and how will it be beneficial for the economy at large?
The amount of investment that middle class or even the lower middle class does in small savings instruments, we all know. For instance, they invest in public provident fund, they invest in post office savings instrument, they invest in other certificates issued by Government of India. And the amount is considerably high. In fact, it's about 93,000 crore in the last financial year. This investment is meant to help the lower income group and the middle class to maintain a long-term financial security. So there is a lot of demand for those sort of instruments. What the RBI Retail Direct window opened today does is add a very major channel to this small savings package. It creates a new investment avenue. Now somebody might say that this investment avenue was already there. It is true. But what is important about today is that it has been made, first of all, more publicized. And secondly, RBI has introduced a lot of new features to make it easy and simple for these investors to invest in these RBI papers. Now, why would they invest in RBI papers? The reason is because for various reasons, the government has been keen that people should come into the RBI papers which are directly managed by the Reserve Bank of India. The small savings instruments, as you know, are largely managed by the government. And there's a conflict of interest because it is also the fiscal policy maker, it is also the administrator of the small savings. So essentially, first of all, the Retail Direct, the advantage is that first of all, it gives people a new avenue and a very powerful avenue to invest in. Earlier, in fact, to put it in perspective, lots of people who invest in public provident fund, they would know that the maximum investment that is possible is about for 15 years. But in RBI papers, you can go up to 20 years, can even go up to 30 years. Now, these are very major avenues for small-scale investors to have a long-term, risk-free investment which they can dip into.
So this provision that you're saying of guaranteed settlement in government securities, there is an assurance that they will be getting a certain return back. This aspect will encourage small investors like people from middle class, small businessmen, senior citizens, and as you said, even people from the lower class to invest directly in government securities?
Particularly people from the lower class, because they would want the risk-free avenue. Now, obviously, the risk-free avenue was there in the small savings instruments, but there are a lot of inconsistencies in those instruments, which is not a good idea for people when they're investing. Remember, one of the problems about the small savings instruments is that they do not have a long-term, as I said, beyond 15 years, you cannot invest. So if you're trying to think of it as a pension fund for yourself, they cannot operate because the maximum limit is 15 years. Secondly, there are limits to how much that can be invested. In the Retail Direct, which RBI has opened, first of all, there are no limits, and secondly, the limits are so high that it's actually very, very almost negligible in terms of the opportunities for the retail investor to invest. And obviously, it does good for the government because it's being managed by the RBI, that is like the banks. So they will be almost like bank papers, and therefore it sort of also smoothens out the management of the monetary policy, which of course is an associated benefit from investing in these instruments.
What is the significance of the initiatives launched today in expanding these sources of financing for government's ambitious infrastructure building plans? Now that access to capital markets has been made easier and secured for investors, you expect more and more retail investors to come forward and invest in government securities markets and forge a partnership with the government in building an Atmanirbhar Bharat?
In this context, Sonu, I would ask you to look at the Ombudsman scheme that has been created today. I would rate that as a very significant development. Why? Since 2015, the government has started process of formalization of the economy, which means to bring more and more people to do all their transactions about cash through the banking system. It started with Jan Dhan. It went on to include the large-scale insurance schemes like Jan Arogya Yojana and all. It also includes the GST, where a small business gets formalized and signs up for GST. And it actually includes a very large sector of the informal economy which comes under the Swanidhi scheme. Now, how is that related to this ombudsman? At the heart of all these schemes lies a bank. Whenever somebody doing any sort of transaction through any mobile-based app, at one segment of it runs through a bank. This is very significant. It means that the formalization of the economy has gone on to envelop the poorest section of the society. These people are coming to now deal with banks. Look at another example, the microfinance institutions. Today, they are giving loans, and that loans are also again running through the formal sector because they give out loans either through a bank account or through one of these new fintech companies. But all of them, again, whether they are fintech or banks, essentially a part of the banking sector, the financial sector. That means in a massive way, India's financial sector now includes practically the entire adult population. It's a huge jump that has happened. If you look at the UPI data is an astonishing figure. The latest UPI data shows that the number of transactions on UPI has crossed 100 billion in October. 100 billion is a fabulous number. $100 billion of transaction has crossed in UPI transactions. And remember, the UPI transactions are small transactions. People don't, transfer bank accounts to UPI. They do small, literal transactions with small shops, with hawkers, with everybody. What is happening? All these people who are transacting through the medium of banks or the NBFCs. It is obvious that even if a minuscule percentage of these people have a complaint, where will they complain to? There has to be a system of complaining whenever they get into problems. That complaint will be taken care of by the office of the ombudsman, which is why one nation, one ombudsman is very big thing. So the one nation, one ombudsman, Sonu, is not meant for you and me as much as it's meant for the poorest people. Because you and I have several means to record our complaints. We know how to do it on the bank portal. We know how to go on to other portals for logging our complaint or even to meet the bank. What happens to these people? And remember, we are talking here about this colossal volume of transactions that has started happening. Even if we take a 0.000 decimal of complaints coming from there, which is what it will be, it will not be more than that. Still, there's a massive amount of complaints. And for these poor people, it's very important that these complaints are attended to immediately.
The digitalization has grown by leaps and bounds in the recent 2 years. So you feel that this Reserve Bank integrated ombudsman scheme will further give a fillip to digitalization? As you said, it will embolden people that if there is any problem, they have somewhere where they can go with their complaint?
Absolutely, because it is evident that if such a large volume of transactions is happening, there will be some amount of complaint somewhere. And as I said, even if we take it as a percentage of very low decimal, that still means a considerable number. Look at the people on the poverty line. They have already come onto the banking transaction. NREGA funds are today on the banking transaction plan. There are so many other things you can think of which are in the banking transaction. Direct benefit transfer happens through the banking system. What doesn't happen through the banking system today? If a consumer, and we are talking about a consumer sitting in some place, in some small village, where does she go to complain? If she's told that you have to go to the local bank to complain, you can imagine the amount of unfairness that involves. So therefore, this one nation, one ombudsman gives her the opportunity to just complain on the ombudsman platform. And only when that sort of a thing starts working, as it has started, as it has been announced today, will that give confidence to these people to transact. And remember, for them, even a small amount, when we are talking a small amount, it can mean even 100 rupee. Even 100 rupee not in being in a proper place, maybe due to delay, some transaction going haywire. We all know electronic transactions hardly ever go haywire, but sometimes in a million transactions, there can be one fault. But that one fault can be very costly for that family. That is where the ombudsman comes in. And that is why it is so important, because this is such a huge confidence booster as like nothing else.
In the last 1.5 years, first-time retail investors have come forward in large numbers to invest in the stock market and given a lot of strength and resilience to the stock markets. Do you envisage the same response for the retail direct scheme as well? Do you see people coming forward in large numbers, investing in government securities directly and thereby financing the infrastructure development in the country?
Definitely. And again, the retail direct scheme, people will make smart choices and people know how to use their money. So they'll look at the tax arbitrage. For instance, right now, some of that small savings schemes get tax arbitrage. This one doesn't get a tax arbitrage. So those sort of things that they, hopefully once those get sorted out, people will be more interested here. But again, as I said, coming back again to that ombudsman thing, because even when they're doing it, even for retail transactions in market, the NSE's recent data, which has come out in last month, the National Stock Exchange data shows that the retail transactions, the ticket size of each of those transactions is less than 50,000 rupees. So it means very small investors. Now for these investors, again, the money trail goes to the banks. And where do they exactly put their concerns? They can't be writing letters, they can't be writing emails. It's not that they'll have to pick up a WhatsApp to be able to complain or sign on to Twitter. Those are inefficient ways. The ombudsman scheme, by combining under one ombudsman, the banks, the NBFCs together, gives it the strength to be able to be really a force multiplier for the entire financial sector. It's once that starts happening, and that is what the Prime Minister was talking about today, then you will find an even more large transactions happening on these financial sectors. So we'll see more and more people getting into the formal sector. And already the growth in the transactions in the financial sector has been very impressive. This year, from March to September, the average monthly growth of UPI transaction was 5.8%. And the month-on-month growth in transaction value in October was close to 18%. So these are fabulously big numbers. And that numbers to continue and essentially, again, as I said, for the poorer sections to feel comfortable that yes, this is the way to go. This is where my money is safe. You need a complaint mechanism which has been institutionalized today. So that's why I reckon that as a very important development.
Shubhamoy, if we talk broadly, the Indian economy appears to be on a firm rebound path after the pandemic shock, as indicated by several macro indicators like GST collections, Purchasing Managers Index of manufacturing and services, export growth, direct tax collections. The government has brought in a slew of reforms under the Atmanirbhar umbrella, including the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme for MSMEs, Production-Linked Incentive Scheme to promote manufacturing, and several others in this period. The latest link in this reform cycle is today's initiatives by the RBI. How important is the reforms push and their effective implementation in boosting economic growth of our country?
All of these are like pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. And as the economy starts to get steam, smoothing out the reforms will be important. Remember, the way the reforms are going, there will be issues because right now one of the major challenges that's coming up is in the commodity sector. Prices are rising and that's going to be a major challenge for the management of the economy. But at the same time, it's also opening up possibilities because lots of people are getting opportunities where it was a very limited one. Like, for instance, to take an example, the e-Shram that has been created, the portal for registering labor, has already got something like 7 to 8 crore. In fact, that number is actually very fabulous. Now, what is it doing? It's creating a major data bank of laborers for any prospective entrepreneur, any prospective employer. It wasn't available earlier. These are the sort of stuff which are adding very major force to the reforms. And I suspect that these changes will be something which will be of very great force multiplier for the Indian economy. And what you're seeing in terms of the expectations that is coming along in the market from the different entrepreneurs, different companies in terms of being able to sell more, in terms of able to invest more, is largely built on this underlying confidence tree.
Shubhamoy, thank you so much for this in-depth and insightful discussion.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on state of economy and customer-centric initiatives of RBI. The participants were Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, economic analyst, and Sonu Sood, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.